Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to be talking about Andrew Yang's perfect cabinet and who his perfect choice for Secretary of Agriculture should be when Andrew Yang becomes president on January 20th, 2021. It is my opinion that the absolute perfect choice for Andrew Yang's Secretary of Agriculture, the person who's going to be in charge of choosing how we grow food, how we grow livestock to be eaten, how we deal with nutrition in this nation, is the pro skater Tony Hawk. All right, now I hear you. You're like, what on earth? Why on earth would Andrew Yang put Tony Hawk in a professional skateboarder in as his Secretary of Agriculture? Well, there are very good reasons, and I'm going to tell them to you right now. All right, so first and foremost, just a minor thing, and it's one of the reasons why I'm choosing him. Excuse me. I met Tony Hawk when I was 15 years old. So I am a huge skateboard fan, really, really big skateboard fan. I actually have traded in my skateboard for a bicycle, basically just from an age perspective. But I would say up until about the time I was 35 years old, I was a very active skateboarder. And it was a big part of my life, and I really like skateboard culture. And I think that's the closest I come to skateboard culture nowadays is Nike SBs. So, but why should Tony Hawk be the Secretary of Agriculture? Well, there's a very good reason. So one, and by the way, when I met Tony Hawk in person when I was 15 years old, we just, me and my friends were going to a local, a skate exhibition. I believe it was Vans, and this was like in 1985. Vans was putting on a skateboard expedition in our local. I live in the Philadelphia area, and we drove to New Jersey to see this, and me and a couple buddies, and it was really pretty wild. We got to see a lot of cool tricks on ramps and things like that. And I remember specifically, actually, even there's about 200-300 kids there, right, and some adults. And even back then, I was not able to get Tony Hawk to sign my board. But I did, I was like within 5 feet of him. And it was one of the things that was funny was he was just, and him and all of the skateboarders were just so, like, they thought it was humorous that people wanted their autograph. And they were just, using Sharpies and signing boards. And it was pretty wild. This was back in the early days of skateboard sponsorship. And just so you're aware that is also one of the critical aspects of America is just how much commercial product placement has become a part of our culture, right? It's a really big deal. So skateboards are one of the biggest product carriers. It's one of the biggest activities that have carried product placement, mostly I think there's more money made on sneakers from skateboards than skateboards themselves, so no question of that, right? So, and to this day, I'm a huge fan of Vans, all right? So basically, I could tell you then, and I can tell you now, Tony Hawk was he really was he was a kind, generous, and honest person, right? You could tell that he was really, just really amazed to have the privilege to do what he was doing, and you still see that awe and that thankfulness for his celebrity even today, right? And it's really charming aspect of him, and I think one of the things that's really going to be needed in Andrew Yang's cabinet, right, is going to be people to ground these incredibly powerful, incredibly intelligent thought leaders, right? And by the way, Tony Hawk very genuinely is a thought leader. If you're doubting that, you won't be in a minute. I'll give you his bona fides. But Tony Hawk is he's a really unique individual, right? So why should we choose him for Secretary of Agriculture? Well, one, I think a lot of people have underestimated Tony Hawk. He is a few different things. He is an athlete. Everybody knows that. But he's not just an athlete. He is a world-class athlete. And he's not just an athlete that's performed well in an established sport. He made a sport, right? It is arguable that skateboarding is 2 or 3 or even 4 times larger than it would have been, and that its impact all over the world has really been transformative based on much of the work that Tony Hawk has done, right? Now, one, there are absolutely, well, actually, to tell the truth, Tony Hawk is truly, truly unique in that he has not only performed at an incredibly high-performing bar, but he's done that and he's remained healthy, right? Like many sports, skateboard has a dark history, and some of the substances that people have chosen to use in that have really dimmed their light far earlier than should have been. Alba is a perfect example. Alba was just an incredibly talented skateboarder, and and without a doubt, his career was very much dimmed by choices he made, right? Whereas Tony Hawk came out the other side of that a little better than some of the other. So performing well in a sport, and then actually also serving in that sport as a commentator and serving to build that industry and to build that sport up for everybody involved. Tony Hawk was critical in all of that, right? So everybody knows he's an athlete. What a lot of people don't know is he's an author. He's written multiple books. And then in addition to that, he's a CEO, right? He has his own company. He has served as a chief executive officer. So he's a sound business person. He's a writer. And he is an athlete, right? Now, here's the twist. And everybody, I hear what you're saying. You're like, well, what does he know about agriculture, right? Well, you're right. He does not. Tony Hawk does not know a lot about agriculture. But one of the things that we are now looking at, especially with Andrew Yang's Perfect Cabinet, is the idea that much of the information that we have today is no longer relevant, right? And that we really need to strip everything down and build it from the ground up, right? So if you put Tony Hawk in as the Secretary of Agriculture, one of the things it's going to do is it's going to take that old boys club, that old girls club, and break it down, right? Right now, if you put a standard rote choice in for Secretary of Agriculture, you're going to get people who have relationships already established within agriculture, right? And I am very much thinking that agriculture, especially American agriculture, needs to have some of these old relationships completely broken, right? And the reason why is for a long time, America has been funding agriculture, has been funding small and large farms, right? And the reality is, I'm thoroughly convinced this is no longer needed. Absolutely no longer needed. We do this out of tradition and we do this out of respect for farmers, but the reality is there's really zero need for us to fund any creation of food for America. We've reached a point where, this will tell you how far we've transitioned in nutrition, right? Within my church, I'm a poor rich person, right? I work near Boeing, and some of the people who are connected to Boeing, they have just immense amounts of money, right? And it's really incredible, like, right? I do well, and even within the circles I run, I'm pretty much considered poor, which is really astounding to me, right? And the thing is, we're upper middle class at best, right? But I run in some circles where there are some people with some very, very serious money. And one of the things you see there is that Trader Joe, recently, this blew my mind, right? I watched a conversation between two people in my church, and they were like, you still shop at Trader Joe's? And they're like, sure, yeah, they have lots of good food. And they're like, oh, no, I can't shop at Trader Joe's. I've moved everything over to Whole Foods and Martindale's, right? And they're like, because the reality is there's just some practices that Trader Joe's for scale, that practices that I just can't abide within my nutritional choices, right? And I was like, holy cows, we've gotten to the point where upscale grocery stores like Trader Joe's, organic grocery stores, right, with incredibly high-end material, are now looked down on like they're the Piggly Wiggly, right? We run so deep, right, in quality for nutrition that the reality is the idea that the government is funding any type of food creation in America, in my opinion, is ludicrous, right? And so if you get an honest, kind person like Tony Hawk, put him in as Secretary of Agriculture, The kindness, the honesty, the genuineness, that's going to make sure he interacts with those people to treat them fairly, right? But also because he's going to have to be taught from the ground up the basics of agriculture and what's important, there's a possibility that people with truly transformative, new, modern ideas for agriculture can be heard. Whereas if you choose somebody who would logically fit in as Secretary of Agriculture, you're going to get that old boys club, you're going to get that old girls club fully intact, right? Which means that business relationships that should not be preserved will absolutely be preserved, right? And that also the government's relationship with those business interests is also going to be preserved, right? So if you bring in somebody new like Tony Hawk, a CEO, an author, a world-class athlete, you have the intelligence you need. You have the compassion you need to deal with everybody involved in a fair way, but you get this opportunity to break these old, destructive, regressive molds, right? That keep our government interacting with farmers in the same way and keep business ventures interacting with each other in the same way. And so I really think that Tony Hawk is the absolutely perfect choice for Secretary of Agriculture, specifically for Andrew Yang in 2020. That's my opinion. I'd love to hear your opinion. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.